Welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon, and today we are joined by Makhosi Candiss Pitts. Makhosi is on a mission to help high achievers in the spiritual closet navigate the changes of spiritual awakening in order to uncover their purpose, freedom, fulfillment, and manifest limitless prosperity. By utilizing various spiritual gifts like direct communication with the ancestors and spirits, spiritual sight and hearing, energy healing, divination, prophecy, trance, and bending of reality, she assists others to uncover who they really are and break through the blocks, keeping them from reaching their full potential. Makhosi spent 3 years traveling back and forth between the US and West Africa in initiation into the Dogon culture, changing the paradigm of her perspective about life and spirituality, as well as studying the knowledge of ancient Egypt. In the following year, she was led by her ancestors through her dreams and synchronicities to complete a series of 7 initiations, tests, and trials in South Africa to become a fully initiated Sangoma or a Zulu shaman. Not everyone who begins this training finishes. Some people even die in the process. One doesn't choose to become a shaman. A shaman is chosen by the spirit world before birth. It is only through a spiritual awakening and a specific illness that one is called to remember their life's purpose. After obtaining bachelor's degrees in business and marketing while preparing for medical school, she soared to the top 1% of consultants in a $250 million direct sales company in only 9 months. At the top, her world was shattered as she realized what society defines as success was not fulfilling, and there had to be something she was missing in the big picture. This experience led to her passion to help others struggling at the top of their game find the freedom and fulfillment they are seeking. She delivers ancient wisdom in a modern way to resonate with people from all walks of life by applying fundamental spiritual truths to help high achievers consciously create satisfying success in the real world. The wisdom she shares is all inclusive, non religious, and practical. Her clients walk away with a completely different perspective of their life and the world and obtain the tools they need to be happy, successful, and fulfilled spiritual beings having a human experience. Interestingly enough, she says that one of her clients said that she was the Google Translate of spirituality. Now, during the interview, we discussed Makhosi's infertility journey, her brief encounter with menopause, how hormone imbalances affected her pregnancy, the importance of detaching from outcome to achieve desired results, which is so important when we talk about this in the Menopause Movement membership so much about how to detach from outcome, because when we do that, we're able to actually focus on our processes. We talk about the definition of shaman and how that without a cultural context, it's almost impossible to define. How spiritual gifts are available to anyone, but not all are called to the path of the shaman. We talk about the importance of gratitude in everyday life. And then we discuss the questions people are asking before they come to Makhosi. The primary one being, why am I so unfulfilled? We discuss the definition of purpose, why it's important, and how it's impossible to think yourself to a purpose. Now, at the end of the episode, make sure you visit drmichellegordon.com/podcasts. That's Dr. Michelle, Michelle, Gordon, Gordon.com/podcast, PODCASTS. Don't forget the S or you won't get there. You can find the show notes, plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. Now, if you enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. And thank you so much for all the 5-star reviews. We appreciate them so much. And if you have any questions about the topics covered in this or any of the other podcasts, I invite you to open a conversation with me on Instagram at Dr. Michelle Gordon. That's DrMichellelleGordon. And I promise I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Now let's go on to the interview with Makhosi. Thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. So, Makhosi, thanks so much for joining the Menopause Movement podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, I want to hear your hormone story. You said that you've had like hormone issues. So let's go ahead and start with that.
Oh my gosh, where to even begin with that? I swear I've been having hormonal issues since I started my cycle at like 10. I'm
You were
dealing
10
with,
years old when you started your period?
yeah, yeah,
Wow. I
very
was
young.
13. That's really young.
Yeah, 10 was so young. And almost
Yeah.
immediately I started having issues with endometriosis, polycystic ovaries. I've dealt with many challenges over my life. Probably when I started to notice that things were really out of whack, my husband and I at the time we were engaged. So this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I was having cysts on my ovaries all the time, ended up in the hospital, having all the challenges with different types of birth control. And the doctor told me, he was like, listen, your mom was my patient, so I know where you're headed. And he was like, if you all want to have children, you probably need to go ahead and start that because you have a very limited window here. He's like, your fertility is not going to last.
You're talking about you had your period at 10. You got you immediately started having issues with endometriosis, you had polycystic ovarian disease, and you were told by your doctor that you had you may have some fertility issues, and that it was time. So how old were you when you were told this?
Let's see, maybe 22.
Wow.
Very young.
Yeah. So did you have children right away?
I tried for over a year to get pregnant. And during that time, I was like doing all of the things. So I got off of birth control and I was taking prenatal vitamins and intentionally trying to get pregnant. And I did end up having a miscarriage during that time.
I'm sorry.
And it was so challenging. And so he started me on Lupron injections. And I was like, I think I did it for 3 months. And I was like, these hot flashes are killing me. These hot flashes are killing me. My mood is all over the place. I can't take it. So he said, well, the last option is we need to do laparoscopic surgery in order to remove some of the endometriosis and also stimulate your ovaries to ovulate, because I wasn't ovulating.
Okay.
At the time.
Were you overweight?
I was a little bit overweight, not much. I was probably maybe 20 pounds overweight.
Okay.
Did try
Typical
to lose
American
weight. Yeah, I was doing metformin at that time as well. So
were you diagnosed with diabetes type 2, or was that because of the polycystic ovarian disease?
Because of the PCOS, yeah.
Okay.
So
right. Did you also notice, just to ask you, because one of the things that happens to women who have PCOS is they can get hirsute. And what that means is that there's hair in like all over the place. So did you have that problem too?
I've never had it as bad as they say that you can have it. Even still to this day though, I've always had like a patch of hair on my stomach that's probably darker than normal, little hairs that pop up on my chin, every now and then.
Just wait for menopause to really hit. Now, let me tell you about chin hairs.
Yeah,
I got a mustache hairs. Now.
I mean, also I had a mustache as well. I say had, I still do. I just take care of it every week or so, but mine was never.
I'm just
as
plucking
bad as...
every single day. Every day, man, I'm in there. Oh, another chin hair, another mustache hair. It's crazy. And they get wiry.
Yeah.
They start out like it's like soft and it's no big deal. And then out of the blue, like they feel like a man's face. And it's like, no.
I think what's worse is if you have just like a little bit of fuzz, it's not as bad. It's when you get those really long ones and you're like, wait a minute, how did I miss this?
I know. And like I had this one hair on the side of my face. It was like long and bald, but it was like this, it was like blonde and it was like this long. I'm like, what the heck? And I, pulled it out. Thankfully it never came back, but
it's like, oh my gosh. I have one like that, but it's on my chest.
Yeah.
And I call it my wing.
I love it. I love it. So you can fly off like an angel. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. All
Super
right.
sexy.
So you had laparoscopic surgery then.
Yeah. So I had, well, actually I did not.
Oh,
So
okay.
I got off the Lupron and they scheduled a surgery. I ended up in the hospital again with another cyst. This time it was one of the blood-filled cysts. So I was in the hospital for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And apparently some things happened around that time. Some magical ovulation happened at that time. So I ended up having I was scheduled to have surgery a couple of weeks later. And I go in, I'm getting prepped for surgery. The anesthesiologist comes in and talks to me. And they were like, oh, yeah, we have to do a pregnancy test before we take you back. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I've been trying to get pregnant for over a year and I've been having all of these struggles. There's no way I'm pregnant. Well, time for my surgery comes and goes. Then another hour passes. Then another hour passes. And I'm like, where the heck is my doctor? Like, why am I still sitting here? And so he comes in and he's got this huge grin on his face. And he's like, listen, I had to wait until all of my surgeries were done because I had to be the one to come in here and tell you that you're pregnant.
Oh, wow. And how long ago was that?
Yeah. So my son is 7. So that was 2012.
Okay. That's
So
great.
it's been 7 years. Yeah. It was very challenging though, because I still had hormonal issues. My progesterone was super low. So my body kept trying to miscarry. I was on bed rest 6 months out of my pregnancy, taking progesterone in the hospital. My son ended up coming early because of that.
Did they give you steroids?
You know what? I don't remember.
I mean, usually when we have premature babies and we know that they're going to come early, we give steroids to help mature the lungs. How early was he?
Well, no, he was only like we literally got right to the 37-week mark.
Oh, okay. So he was very easily viable. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have to go through that. I was, but they did have me in the hospital for a couple days before that 37-week mark.
Did they induce you?
You can just, I ended up being induced. I think actually they let me out of the hospital right at that 37 mark. I was home for like a couple days and then I started having contractions and ended up in the hospital in labor, but it wasn't moving along fast enough. So they gave me Pitocin.
Yeah, I think everybody gets Pitocin nowadays.
Yeah.
So you had a natural delivery?
No.
Oh, you had a C-section?
The cord ended up being, I had emergency C-section because the cord was wrapped around.
So what's really interesting here is you've lived quite an interesting life up until you've gone through a lot of things that a lot of the menopausal women, who listen to this podcast have gone through. I mean, endometriosis, you probably had really painful periods. I can relate to that. I had super painful periods. I never had polycystic ovarian disease, but many women do. And one of the biggest issues with polycystic ovarian disease is, conception and getting those follicles to go to the right place. And then I'm sure you're not the only woman in the world who's ever had a miscarriage, and that can be devastating. And so it seems like, you really bounced back from that and you're able to kind of get over that emotionally. And then after the Lupron and getting scheduled for your surgery, even though you had hormonal imbalances, you were still able to bring your son into the world, which is amazing. Now, energetically, what did you do to prepare yourself for pregnancy? Because one of the things that I've seen over and over as I've gone more into studying the metaphysical side, and we're going to get on that because you're a shaman, right? Yeah, so we're going to get into that too. But one of the things is that if we're constantly in a state of stress, as a woman who's trying to get pregnant, our bodies are going to say no because we're too much in a state of stress. And if we think back to, hunter-gatherer times, as the human species evolved, we wouldn't get pregnant in times of leanness. We'd have to, you have to have abundance, and you have to be able to get your brain into a place where, you know, as the meditators would say, like a theta state, out of beta into theta. But
Yeah.
so I'd like to know how did you consciously manage your energy back in 2012?
Yeah. So back in 2012, I was not a shaman. That was never even on the horizon. That was not a thought
Okay.
ever. But I was fairly health conscious at the time. I had been trying to manage my weight using natural methods. And I was really adamant about wanting to have a very stress-free, relaxed experience through the birth. So even before I got pregnant, I was already kind of shifting into that mind frame. I can say that for me, I definitely think that being stressed was what was blocking me from ovulating. It wasn't until I essentially just relaxed and I was, whatever's out there, universe, God, whatever you call it, I was like, I completely surrender. If I have a child, I would be so blessed and so grateful and so happy for that. But if it doesn't happen for me, I know that my life will still be full in other ways. And so it was when I detached from it having to happen,
Yeah.
that was literally when it happened 2 weeks before my surgery.
Wow. So we talk a lot in my membership, the Menopause Movement membership. We talk a lot about the importance of detaching from outcome, and we have some exercises around that, because without going too much into it, the magic happens when we detach and we focus on the process. And whatever that process is, the process of getting pregnant isn't so horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
the only part that wasn't great was, trying to manage it. That part's not as fun.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
we need to get busy on this day.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm one of these people who, the people who have infertility issues, they don't like people like me, because I went off the pill and I was pregnant in 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, that was a completely different thing for me, because I had all these identity issues and stuff that we don't have to go into, but I wasn't even sure that I had all the female parts. And so it was really interesting for me to actually, all of a sudden now be carrying a child in my stressful state. So I was, I was in college and pretty stressed, but at the end of the day, detaching from the outcome is always the best way to get stuff done. So fast forward, and now you're a shaman. So before we get into like that story, I'd like, because I don't even actually know, what is the definition of a shaman?
Oh, that's a really good one. And I've done a few videos on this because there's a lot of misunderstanding about who or what a shaman is.
Yeah.
I've actually Googled it just to see what people think. And
well, Google is the world's leading authority on everything bullshit, right?
Right.
So you may not even, as a physician, right? I'm a practicing surgeon, and every once in a while I get somebody who comes in with, they'll have some stack of papers like this, right? It's like, okay, this is what Google says. And I'm like, okay, well, do you want to go to Dr. Google? Because I'm not Dr. Google, right? And I just, like, I spent 15 years of my life learning how to do this. And so, but you're welcome to go to Dr. Google. He's down the street. So
we'll have him come into the room.
Yeah, they'll probably edit out the bullshit, but it's true. I mean, but I'll say that Google is truly, the world's leading authority on all things baloney, but also a lot of really good information. And you think back, you're just 30 years old now, 30 something, 32.
Yeah,
Yeah,
30.
Yeah. Okay. So 30 years ago, I was 25. And so I remember life before Google, and life before Google was encyclopedias and the Dewey Decimal System and a lot of time in the
Mhm.
library. And so even though Dr. Google is not my friend, I still love the fact that if I can't remember something, all I have to do is Google it. So it is
Yeah,
kind of cool.
absolutely.
But anyway,
It
back to
is
what a
it is
shaman is.
nice. Yeah, so in Google, you can, or even dictionary.com, look up what a shaman is.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there's no cultural context to understand what a shaman is. So if you're
Ah,
looking from the West and you are looking at some words on a screen, what I see happening a lot is people automatically put uh, a shaman into a box. Or really, we do this with any label, really, or any
mhm.
identity. We don't have to get into all that, but
Well, we
people
can
think,
though. We can't talk about the fact that we can only really understand things within our own, you know, and we know that the magic happens outside the box, but not everybody understands that. And so we're only going
Mhm,
to see the world through the filter of the box that we have. But for me, not having ever met a shaman before, I've only read about Sha people,
mhm,
so it's and I mean, I've studied a fair amount of Native American history and Australian Aboriginal history, and um, but I'm not so much any of the African nations. I don't understand that side, but I've read the
mhm.
Native American side of things. But I still, that doesn't mean I understand it. I've never been to like a peyote ceremony or an ayahuasca ceremony or even psilocybin. Not my thing. So
Mhm. Yeah, at the core, I mean, in a definition sense, there is like certain gifts, certain spiritual abilities that are prescribed to a shaman. So a lot of
okay.
people call themselves shaman because they have these spiritual gifts. The spiritual gifts are kind of like the byproduct. They are not actually what a shaman is. You can have the spiritual abilities and spiritual gifts and not be a shaman. And in what a lot of people don't understand is in our indigenous systems, any of our ancestral practices, there are many different types of, we'll call them like spiritual healers in a community. But the shaman's role is to be essentially, they are the bridge between the physical and the spirit plane. They are the one who communicates between the two realms. So they can act on behalf of an individual in the community trying to heal spiritually, but then they also are charged with the community's welfare. And so that's where you see things like shamans that can bring rain and foresee certain events that may affect the community. And so maybe the tribe needs to move and the shaman would be the one who has that responsibility. It is essentially a role of leadership and service in one.
I love that. And it's so funny because I'm sure you've heard of Paramahansa Yogananda, right? Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Autobiography of a Yogi, this guy here. So I'm
Yeah,
reading his
I
lessons.
haven't read it, but I have heard of him.
So I'm reading the lessons because he resonated with me, and they're only $90, so I just bought them, and they come every couple weeks. But what's really interesting, he talks about in this, he talks about the third eye, right? We know the third eye right here, right,
Mm-hmm.
as the doorway. And what he says is that it's a, and this is the reason I'm bringing this up, is because I think that that a shaman and a yogi are probably the same thing. In if we're looking at definitions, right? And in this super
Mm-hmm.
mirror, the developed yogi can infallibly perceive the past, present, and future destinies of all people, including himself and the cosmos. When I read that, I wrote, well, what is the path to becoming a developed yogi? Was my first question. And secondly, do I want to see this? Because do I want to see what's going to happen for me or anybody I love or anybody else in the past, present, and future? And when you start getting into the metaphysics of everything, because of quantum mechanics, there is no time, right? And things can happen instantly.
Right.
And we can influence our past selves, we can influence our future selves right from this present moment, which is really, I'm sure anybody who is watching this and doesn't want to believe I'm a surgeon. I'm wearing scrubs. I really am a surgeon, but I don't talk like a surgeon because I study this, metaphysical stuff. And I was an atheist for a really long time, but I'm not anymore because I've ended up on a spiritual path. But so I don't think there's a lot of difference between what a yogi is and what a shaman is. I think it's just cultural. Again, we go back to what the cultural significance is, right? So the yogis come out of primarily India, and shamans come out of almost everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree
well,
with that statement?
I think there is. I think there's some similarities and then some differences.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that for a yogi, anyone, if they made the decision, could become a yogi, could walk that path and develop themselves. Everyone has the ability to develop their spiritual gifts. The spiritual gifts are not what make a shaman a shaman. They are not what make the yogi the yogi. It's the path. So a shaman, the main difference that I see in all of the different cultures around the world, because you can find shamans by some name all over the world. And actually, there are even different types of shamans. There are multiple different types of shamans, even in one culture. But a shaman is born to become a shaman. We don't have a choice, really. For us, it's like, well, we have a choice, but you're on the path to death, essentially. We have to deal with death in order to be in this role. And kind of the common thread that we see is also there's a certain type of, we call it the calling sickness. There's a certain illness that manifests when it's time for someone who has to become a shaman to do that. And we don't have option, really. Like, you can decide not to become a yogi if you're like, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just want to practice a little bit here. We as shamans, we don't have really a choice. It's so funny you mentioned, that you're a surgeon, et cetera, et cetera. I was pre-med in college.
Uh-huh.
And I started, like, literally when I graduated from college, and all I had to do was take my MCAT. And I had just had my son at that time. And I was like, I don't know why. And of course, I was already sick. I had the calling sickness starting at like age 15. So
this is your PCOS?
No, the calling sickness manifested for me as an undiagnosable illness. So I ended up in and out of the hospital all the time. They said, oh, it's fibromyalgia. Oh no, it's this. They diagnosed me with a rare immune deficiency called CVID, et cetera, schizophrenia, just a bunch of different things. They could not figure out what was actually wrong with me. I would be up all night screaming. And of course, I was having spiritual experiences from a very young age, combined with that, interacting with the spirits, interacting with the dead, et cetera. And whenever I left college and decided that I was not going to go to medical school, it was very shortly after that, maybe a year and a half after that event, no, 2 years after that, that my spiritual journey kicked in. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting to me that you mentioned that, because I do see that there are a lot of people who are very intellectual beings who are now crossing into the spiritual plane and trying to make sense of all of that and be able to apply it in a really, really practical way. And so I love what you're doing. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really hard. It's really hard to, pray away appendicitis, right? And right. In surgery, we have this little saying, and it's like, we heal with steel. It's, so, there are certain things that it, you know, require intervention. At the same time, I think that we have people, the plastic surgeon Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics, which is, if you haven't read that book, it's a really great book on working with your mind. So he was a plastic surgeon, and he would, people would come in with, some sort of a disfigurement, and he would fix it, or they would come in with a perfectly normal face and think that they needed to fix something. And so throughout this book, he talks about how the mind is super powerful. And throughout my journey over the last few years, it's really going back to the power of the subconscious mind, and the power of how we think and how we speak to ourselves, that really makes our lives what they are. Right. And so if I'm going to look in the mirror every time and say, you're a fat pig, then I am going to be a fat pig. If I'm going to look in the mirror every time and see that I need to lose some weight, but I still love this body and it can do so many amazing things and so much more than I let it do when I was in my 20s, then, and so I think everything is the matter of how we shift our perspective and what the perspective is. And so we're all on a spiritual path, whether we want to believe it or not. So even the most ardent atheist is on their own spiritual path, figuring out the meaning of life. And through whatever iteration of their life, that everybody ends up back at God. Everybody ends up back at God. And
Right.
these are just truths. And it's things that I didn't think I would ever say. When I was in high school, I was like a crazy Jesus freak, and my friends make fun of me, from when I was in high school, and then I kind of slipped away from it because the church didn't treat me well. I'm married to a lady, and that's automatically rejection right there, because people seem to care about sexual identity for whatever reason. But when I just saw that there's always availability of something bigger. There's whether you call it God, or whether you call it energy, or whether you call it universe, or whatever it is, the world that we live in is something that we've created, and that we have the ability and the opportunity to change everything just based on how we see things.
Absolutely. It's so interesting too that you bring up, this kind of underlying truth that is like, when we pass on, all of us, we move on to the other side. Whatever you want to call it, we all move on to the other side. This is not a permanent state that we're in. This physical body, not a permanent state. So it's interesting because I do, in my healing practice, or whatever you want, it's more of a spiritual, I'm more of a spiritual teacher. And I work with people of all backgrounds, Christians, atheists, even Muslims, Jews, like every single background. I have absolutely no issues working with them, because as long as I know what your language is, right? Mm-hmm. Even if your language is science, I spent a lot of time studying science, physics, quantum physics, the sciences in general, and business as well, because I've been a business owner for 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. And I just, one of my clients said, you're like the Google Translate of spirituality. And if you know someone's language, their language, you can translate spiritual concepts that can be applied into their life in a way that they understand. Yeah. What we are missing right now, though, a lot in self-help, personal development, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, what we are missing is that application, the integration, the embodiment, the empowerment aspect, because we love to be so philosophical and think that we are so smart and keep everything in our head, but have a hard time applying it. for
there's
sure.
like a whole, there's a whole school of people, intellectuals who think that the mind is everything. And I have to admit that back in my 30s, I thought that it was the mind, everything was everything. And then I had this little boy who was perfect, who got a brain tumor, or whatever. He had got some sort of a weird cancer, and his brain was affected. He had to have radiation and chemo, and I had to really look at all my beliefs around that. And
Mhm.
was he still perfect now that his brain has been damaged? And I'm happy to say he's still alive and doing well, but he's different than he was when he was born, because he went through an illness. And what's really interesting, because I'm looking back at this, I'm sure that this version of me, my 55-year-old me, was supporting my 30-year-old me, saying it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to
Mhm.
get through this. At that time, I didn't really look for a spiritual practice. I just survived every day. And,
Mhm.
and, I mean, it would talk about stress,
Right.
I smoked,
Right.
you know,
That was the way you were coping with it. And
yeah.
and we do have this idea too that there has to be a spiritual practice, and practices are helpful. Meditation is helpful. Healing frequencies, taking, doing ceremony or ritual, those sorts of things, they can be very helpful to that person. However, I think that the best spiritual practice is how you are living
Yeah.
your life
Who you're
every
being.
day. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I started asking this question way back, I would say back in May. I started asking myself every morning, who am I going to be today?
Hmm.
And back in May, I didn't really care that much, and so especially when it came to like my body, I wasn't exercising the way I should be. I wasn't eating the way I should be. And I've shared this on my Facebook Lives that from the end of May through, I would say, October, maybe September, I gained like 20 pounds. It's like my clothes didn't fit. I had to go buy new clothes. I was at a conference in California. I had to go out and go to Kohl's and buy some clothes because my clothes didn't fit. And I was like, oh no, what did I let myself, how did I let this happen? Who was I being? And,
Hmm.
and I actually observed myself eating the wrong foods and saying, well, I want this satisfaction right now. And so I've taken a complete 180 since, I would say the beginning of last month or so. And, and the weight, I mean, at my age, the weight comes off a little slower. So it's been a slow 5 pounds, but it's coming off. Right. So, so now I have 15 pounds to go to get back to where I was back in May. Um,
Mm.
but the point I'm making is that, every morning when I get up, I won't get out of bed until I'm grateful for the
Mhm.
day, grateful to be alive, grateful to be taking breath. And that has changed kind of everything. The way I interact with people, the way I do my job, the way I do everything, finding a place to have
Yeah,
gratitude.
yeah, that by itself can be so impactful. I think that people don't realize that at any given time, the life that you're living at this present moment, and of course, present is constantly changing, it is only the sum of not just what you experienced, but how you chose to perceive what you experienced. And you're experiencing now the physical manifestation of that. So whenever I am working with a new client, taking someone in, what we'll notice very early on is they feel this misalignment, right? Like, how did I get here? And why is this not making me happy? Why am I unfulfilled? And when we really start to take things apart, most of the time they were being a version of themselves that was not true to who they really are, to their authentic self, to their higher self, who they were born to be, who they were uniquely encoded to be on this planet. They've instead decided to be, up until this point, who they thought they should be,
Right.
rather than what was really in alignment. And then that's when we find ourselves in crisis.
That's true. And you know, we talk about alignment a lot. We talk about this in the Menopause Movement membership as well, about, you know, purpose and fulfillment. And we have exercises that help women kind of get through and figure out where they are and why they're where they are. And to get into alignment with our purpose, our soul purpose, and whatever that message is it's super powerful, and it's so fulfilling once you do. Because, you know, oftentimes what happens, especially, you know, now this is the Menopause Movement podcast, so we're dealing with women who are in menopause. Most of them have children that are grown, so they're empty nesters, maybe in a second career, and you know, they're feeling like, why did an alien beam down and take control of my body? And you had an experience only for 3 months, but you had an experience of a menopause like thing where, you know, you were moody and you were sweating and you weren't sleeping, and you know, weight was probably pouring on, and you kept craving food, and like, why am I craving food? Why can't I stop eating? And these are the problems that women have in menopause. And just a simple awareness practice can help, like, mitigate so many of the symptoms. And we're not taught that.
And I think too, like, for anyone, and you know, I do deal with people of all different ages as well. And specifically with menopause, I'm not in menopause, but you know, I've, ever since my son was born, not quite testing for early menopause, but close to it. And so I've been having the hot flashes and this, that, and the other, and been going down that route for some years now.
Yeah, for you, that's called premature ovarian.
Right now.
Premature ovarian failure is what it's called in your
failure,
age group.
Yes. Yeah. So I have, you know, had that experience. And sometimes what I've noticed is that when we have these physical challenges, you know, you were also talking about the challenges that your son was having. We have to understand that the mind is not the only part of us that is manifesting this life that we're living. And so we have to understand and allow our perspective to shift to, if the mind is not the only aspect of me, if my higher self, if my spirit is also participating in this manifestation, what experiences did my own spirit want me to have by going through this challenge? And if you are a woman, period, if you are a woman and you chose to come here as a woman, we don't have to go into whether or not your spirit is feminine or not, but your physical body was chosen for a reason. And so even with something like menopause, which is a common thread between women, right? It's like a natural thing that we eventually experience.
Yeah, I like to call it the privilege of a long life.
Right. It's like a certain right. It's a certain rite of passage, right? In its own right.
Yes, exactly.
So we have to look at, what is it that my spirit wanted me to learn, or what can I choose to learn? If you don't even want to see it that way, you can say, what do I choose to take away from this experience, rather than looking at it like, oh, I hate this, I can't wait for it to be over, this is miserable. Yes, it is all those things. However,
it doesn't have to be. I mean, actually, you know, one of the biggest fallacies I have, you know, that women in menopause have is that they have to suffer through it. And you know, we in the membership and in the course, we teach women how to love their lives where they are. And that's you know, such an important thing, is to be where you are and to love it, because you can't be somewhere else.
Right.
you know.
The past and the future don't exist,
That's
right?
true. It's
Time
just
doesn't
now.
really exist. It's just all you have really right now is now. And I think that is such a crucial thing that you are taking women through, because especially when we're talking about purpose, right? Or identity, we want to look at those as something to achieve in the future, because we come from a society where it's about achievement. It's about what's next, what's next, what's next.
Right.
And then we miss out on what is happening right now. Your purpose is here. It's in this moment, and you're getting to choose it.
Mm-hmm.
Want to live in it now, or do you want to keep pushing it 5 years in the future, and then that 5 years never happens because it's always ahead of you. It's not here.
Yeah, one of the stories I talk about a lot is like when I finished my surgical residency. So this is a culmination of 15 years, right? 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school. Actually, it was 6 years undergrad because I did community college for 2 years. So 6 years of undergrad plus a baby, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of residency. And so then I got this job and I'm making money and I'm supposed to be happy because I'd been working. I had this like singular purpose. I mean, when we were doing some energy work, and somebody put their hand in front of my head and they say, God, there's like a horn coming out of her head, because I was so focused on finishing medical school and residency. That's all I could think about. So once it was done, I had this huge letdown, like, well, what's next? And I had no I was operating and it was great, and but I had no sense of purpose anymore. And I was aimless probably for a good, I want to say probably 9 years until I just kind of, I just kind of existed. And, and during that time, my son had some more challenges. He had like a seizure disorder that gave him, he almost died a couple times, fell down. And, so I had things that were happening that were keeping me, focused on having to do stuff, but still I didn't have a sense of good identity. I was completely out of alignment with who I am. And I was just kind of going through the motions until I thought, actually it wasn't until menopause hit. And then I started looking at it like, where's the help? Where's the help for women in menopause? Because I looked and there was there was nothing. I mean, there's a lot of information out there and you can get all the information, but none of it is like coherent. And I'm a doctor. And I was like, wait a minute. And then people were saying, well, you'll lose the weight after menopause. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wait that long. I mean, menopause can last for 20 years. What, am I going to be fat for the rest of my life? No, I got to figure out how to do this now, Yeah. So that's when I thought, I saw this opportunity to help other women. And that's kind of how, and that's when I started feeling more purpose. And then I kind of got on the spiritual path and whatnot. But in terms of, helping women find a purpose before their menopause, how do you, where can people find you to come and work with you to get an idea of where their purpose is?
They can find me anywhere, either Instagram or Facebook or YouTube at The Royal Shaman. My website's also theroyalshaman.com. And the interesting thing about purpose and it being something that we think is something that's ahead, what I really encourage people to do is understand that our spirit, our higher self, is constantly, multiple times a day, giving us the opportunity to get back on track. It's only for us to open our eyes, open our perspective, and begin to speak the language of our own spirit in order to be able to see what that purpose is. And you gave such a perfect example of doing that, because it was when you hit menopause. This is really what I teach people, is when you have certain things happen in your life that ding your awareness, that come into your awareness, that kind of shocks you. The challenges that we're facing present us an opportunity to live in our purpose. You can't take your way to purpose. You have to actually move the mind out of the way and allow your spirit to be the one that's driving you. And especially for women, your intuition doesn't die just because you're going into menopause, or just because you're pregnant or whatever. That's our unique gift that we come with, and that by itself can get you on track to your purpose.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the whole other side of that is learning how to recognize what your emotions are trying to tell you. And we don't have time to go into that today, but I would like to invite you back onto the podcast to discuss that, because one of the things that I think we're just in America, especially, we're sorely missing is an understanding of what emotion is and what it's trying to tell us, and how to use our emotions to guide our lives.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be a great topic. I'm happy to come back. And
I'd love to have you back for that.
Dive into that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Makhosi. And, if you guys have any questions for her, send me an email, drgordon@menopausemovement.com. So thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon, and I wanted to take a moment to share what one of our community members has achieved since she's been working with me. Amanda has had an amazing transformation. Amanda was struggling with joint pain, hot flashes, forgetfulness, sleeplessness, weight gain, and an angry mood. In addition, she lost her confidence and self-worth as menopause crept up on her. Since joining the Menopause Movement membership, Amanda's quality of life has improved in ways no one could have predicted. She has truly transcended the symptoms of menopause and is now living her best life. This is what I want for everyone in the community. Take a listen to Amanda's story. I just want to show you what's possible when you join the community and do the work. Transcendence is available for you too. Now here's Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I am 54 years old and I live in the UK. At this moment in time, I'm in a fairly good place in my life. Recently, I've lost 18 pounds and I feel healthier and more content than I have done in a long time. However, it hasn't always been this way. Back in October 2011, I had an accident which resulted in a serious injury and surgery and subsequently changed my life forever. And over the next few years during my recovery, menopause crept up on me, but I didn't realise what was happening straight away. I started suffering from more joint pain. I went from always being cold to feeling like I was going to internally combust several times a day. I was getting really forgetful. My sleep pattern was terrible. I piled the weight on and looked pregnant, and I felt angry all the time. When things were at their worst, I felt incredibly alone and very down. I lost my confidence and self-worth, and I felt completely misunderstood and confused about what was happening to me. I received very little support or information from my GP, and there was limited information on the internet, but what I really wanted and needed was someone to talk to. The turning point for me was at the beginning of July 2019, when completely by accident, I came across Dr. Michelle Gordon's Facebook page on the menopause movement. At that time, she was doing daily live streams, and I started listening to them. I related to a lot of what she was saying, and I was really interested in the variety of topics about menopause that she was talking about, the alternative ways to manage menopause symptoms in a more natural way, and how your mindset is the key factor to transforming your life more positively. I was also really interested to listen to the other ladies in the group and what they had to say. Ladies who had been or were still suffering from similar symptoms to me. How a lot of them have been able to manage their symptoms much better, and how they have turned their lives around and embraced menopause instead of treating it like a demon. Although nervous about taking a risk to join a group I didn't know, I knew that I couldn't and didn't want to carry on living my life the way I was and feeling the way I was feeling. So I made a decision that I too wanted to learn more about menopause, how to manage my symptoms better, and most importantly, learn more about my mindset and the fact that I needed help with changing my outlook on life in order for me to get it back. Life is nowhere near perfect, and some days I still have my struggles, but on the whole, I can honestly say that I am in a much better place than I have been for a long time. And for my down days, I understand better how to manage them so they don't get out of hand. I am now on a journey with a fantastic community of like-minded women, all of whom continue to support each other no matter where we all live, and I no longer feel confused, misunderstood, worthless, or alone. For me, this group has been both a lifesaver and a life changer, and most importantly, the one-to-one private coaching sessions that are available with Dr. Gordon as part of the membership have been invaluable to me. They provide me with an opportunity to discuss more difficult and private issues that I am struggling with, and an opportunity to find solutions to address them. Without doubt, I can wholeheartedly say that I owe Dr. Gordon and her group everything for showing me how to take my life back and, more importantly, take control of it. Joining her membership has been the best thing that I have ever done. However, this course is not for everyone. If you're looking for a quick fix that doesn't cost you any time, money, or effort, then this is not the group for you. But if you're in a similar situation to how I was not that long ago, feeling desperate and at the end of your tether, but are willing to invest in your own future happiness and peace of mind, but are unsure as to what to do, ask questions and talk to Dr. Gordon. And if you choose to take that leap of faith, you won't regret it, because who wouldn't want to take their life back if they had the chance?
If you are feeling like Amanda, you're not alone. There is help for you in the Menopause Movement membership. I want to help you transcend your symptoms and live your best life. To discover how you can become a part of this life-changing community, go to menopausemovement.com.